On a slow Tuesday at the Marshall Chess Club, the laughter came before the game even started.
You can't be serious with that opening, old man. The King's Indian defense went out of style with rotary phones.
Donald didn't look up. His weathered hands kept placing pieces, each one landing with quiet certainty.
Ladies and gentlemen, the dinosaurs are loose. Somebody get a paleontologist.
He finished setting up the board, then lifted his eyes, calm, almost like he'd been waiting for exactly this.
Tell you what, I'll give you a lesson. 5 minutes blitz, you'll learn something.
The room fell quiet. A few heads turned, curious to see if the old man would take the bait.
All right, 5 minutes.
He slid a black knight forward, his thumb resting on the horse's head. Justin's smirk stretched wider. The digital clock was set. 5 minutes each. The old man didn't flinch, and across the room, a door opened. The game began. Justin punched his clock with the force of a man trying to hurry the world.
Come on, Grandpa. You are burning daylight.
Donald's hand moved a pawn. Slow, deliberate, as if he had all the time ever made.
You know you've got a clock, right? Tick-tock.
Justin rattled off moves in a blur. His king's pawn, his knights, his bishops thrust forward like a cavalry charge.
He's not even trying to attack. This'll be over in 2 minutes.
But Donald's position coiled tighter with every move. A fortress of pawns and a bishop pair that watched the center like hawks.
Why can't I break through? His pawns are like a wall.
5 minutes became 3. Justin's hand slammed the clock after every move. Donald's hand barely touched it. And then, for the first time since the game began, Justin stopped talking. He leaned forward, staring at the board as if it had just spoken back. Donald's bishop glided to G7 like a key turning. Justin's king had nowhere left to run.
That can't be right, my queen. My queen is trapped.
32 moves. Donald's rook rolled forward, and the black king tipped over. Checkmate. The clock ticked on in the silence. Not a breath stirred in the whole club.
You got lucky. A total fluke. Old man luck.
Donald leaned back, calm as still water. He didn't argue. He didn't smile. He just waited.
Double or nothing. Another game. Right now, I'll prove it was a fluke.
A few club members exchanged glances. The old man had just checkmated their captain, and it hadn't looked like luck.
All right, set him up.
The second game began the same way, but this time, the silence was heavier. Everyone knew the first one wasn't luck. Justin's opening was even faster this time, his pieces clattering like a drum roll.
Keep up, old man. I am not going easy on you.
Donald's reply was a knight to F6. The same King's Indian he'd built a lifetime ago.
He's doing it again. That same boring setup. I'll crush it this time.
But the old man's hands never hurried. Each piece found its square with an old, unshakable rhythm.
You are just delaying the inevitable. This ends in 10 moves.
A few members drifted closer, pulled by the strange gravity of a quiet old man matching a club captain move for move.
Not bad. He's faster, but speed isn't the same as weight.
The clock ticked down. Justin's advantage in time began to shrink as he spent longer thinking. And then, as if sensing the shift, Justin's voice died in his throat. The second game had just become real. Donald's knight landed on E4, a quiet square that opened like a trap door. Justin's queen was suddenly bare.
What is this? He's not even breathing hard.
19 moves. The rook swept across, and the white king fell. Checkmate. The silence that followed was the real verdict.
No, this is a joke. You are using some old trick.
Donald leaned back. He didn't look at the board. He looked at Justin, and the patience in his eyes was worse than any comeback. A dozen members had drifted over. Whispers threaded through the room. Their captain, the man who'd never lost a Tuesday blitz, was being dissected by a stranger who'd barely spoken.
Third game. Right now, I am not finished.
The whole club held its breath. Even the clock seemed to count slower.
Set the clock.
Justin slammed the button. The third game blazed to life. but his eyes were already wild with something beyond anger, something that looked like fear.
No more hiding. This time I am not giving you any room to breathe.
Donald replied with the king's Indian, his pieces settling into the familiar, indestructible shape. Justin launched his pawns and knights forward, like a battering ram, but every blow met empty air.
He's just sitting there. I am bleeding time and he's not even thinking.
He pushes too hard. Overextension always buries itself.
The members leaned in, some unconsciously holding their breath, trapped between disbelief and a creeping awe.
Time's ticking, old man. You are the one who's supposed to be worried.
But Donald's clock read 3 full minutes. Justin's read less than 2. And Donald still hadn't shown a single aggressive move.
He's planning something. Why can't I see what?
Then Donald's old hand drifted toward his queen. And for the first time, the whole club felt the ground shift. Move 9. Donald's queen slid onto F6, a square surrounded by white knights and bishops, utterly exposed.
A queen's sack? Are you insane? That's a blunder.
But the room didn't laugh. The silence that followed was the sound of 12 chess minds doing the same math. One member whispered something, and another set down his coffee. Someone had seen the finish line. Justin's hand hovered over his piece, then froze, his face rearranged from smug to horrified in a single breath.
No. If I take it, the knight and rook come crashing in. Forced mate.
He'd walked straight into a trap that had been set 9 moves earlier. Every aggressive thrust he'd made was part of Donald's design.
He sees it now. Too late. The line forces mate.
The queen sat there, sacrificed openly, a gift that was really a coffin. The trap was sprung, and behind them, near the back of the club, the door that had opened earlier finally closed. A tall man in a long coat stood absolutely still, staring at the old man with an expression no one else could read. Justin's hand shook as he took the queen, the only move that didn't lose instantly. Donald's knight leaped to H3. Check. The king stepped back, but the net was already drawn. The rook slid to F1. Checkmate. 11 moves, and the white king stood paralyzed in an elegant geometry of death. Justin didn't tip his king. He didn't move. He just stared at the board like a man watching his own house burn. The club looked at the old man differently now, not as a novelty, as something else. The tall man in the long coat began walking forward, his eyes never leaving Donald's face. His lips moved once, silently, forming a word that looked like a memory. Donald seemed to sense it. He looked up from the board, and for the first time, his calm flickered. Someone near the door asked if he knew the old man, but the stranger didn't answer. The whole room felt the weight of something bigger than chess pressing down on them.
Donald Vance, it is you.
The name landed like a stone, dropping into still water. Donald's eyes lifted, but he didn't speak.
Moscow, 1989, the Simul. I never thought I would see this face again.
David's hand slid inside his long coat, fingers searching for something the room couldn't guess. The club was dead silent. Even Justin, still shattered at the board, turned his head. From the coat came an old yellowed photograph. Edges curled, the image on its face still hidden. Donald's weathered hands rested on the table. For a long moment, he didn't reach for it. Justin stared, his defeat mixing with a strange curiosity he couldn't name. David held the photograph so that only the yellowed edge showed, sparing the image for another breath. Every person in the Marshall Chess Club leaned in, waiting for the photograph to turn. David turned the photograph. A young Donald Vance, crisp suit, shaking the hand of Garry Kasparov beneath a banner that read Moscow 1989. Moscow 1989, Kasparov stalemated. The headline on the yellowed clipping said it all. The club erupted in whispers. Stalemated Kasparov, the world champion. In 1989, Justin's face went gray. The old man he'd called a dinosaur had held Kasparov to a draw while he was still in diapers. Donald looked at the photograph with an expression that held 30 years of silence. His lips pressed together, but he didn't look away.
I was there, 26 boards, and only one man stopped the unbeatable. They erased it.
He placed the photograph on the table. It lay there, next to the scattered pieces of a game that suddenly meant nothing. The silence was no longer empty. It was full of everything no one had known about the quiet man in the navy cardigan.
I called him a dinosaur. I offered him a lesson, and he stalemated Kasparov.
The yellowed headline seemed to burn under the club lights, a secret that had waited 30 years to be spoken.
He was a cultural attaché, a diplomat, the only American in the room.
David's voice was rough with old anger, the kind that had been waiting decades.
The Soviet press buried the story. An American, a black American, had done what none of their masters could.
They confiscated the score sheet. The official record simply didn't exist.
I kept the photograph. It was the only proof left.
Donald's hands lay still on the table. He hadn't moved since the photograph appeared. No one in the club moved. The weight of erasure hung in the air like a smoke that hadn't cleared in 30 years. Justin sat frozen, his mouth half open, unable to look away from the man he'd mocked. David finished. The photograph lay on the table between them, and Donald still hadn't spoken. The whole club waited, breath held, for the old man to give the story back its voice.
They took the score sheet that night. Without it, there was nothing to show, nothing to say.
His voice was low, steady, each word falling into the silence with the weight of a stone that had waited decades.
After a while, you stopped needing the world to know what you did. The game itself is enough.
He spoke not with bitterness, but with the quiet patience of a man who had buried his own legend and never looked back.
That was a long Tuesday in Moscow. I remember the light in the hall. Kasparov's hand was warm.
Justin listened, every word burning deeper than any loss on the board. He couldn't look away. The club had expected anger. But what filled the room was something older, a still, deep peace.
You played hard, son. That counts for something. Don't let tonight be the end of it.
Justin's face crumpled, not from defeat anymore, but from the unbearable weight of a kindness he hadn't earned. And in that moment, the old man who had never spoken his greatest victory taught a room full of chess players the quietest lesson of all.
You did this on purpose. You walked in here and humiliated me in front of everyone.
His voice cracked on the last word. The accusation hung in the air, but even Justin didn't believe it.
I just played chess, son. That's all.
Justin's face crumpled further, the anger draining out, leaving only the raw shame beneath.
He's not even angry. How is he not angry?
The whole room watched, frozen, as their captain's world tilted on its axis.
I made a fool of myself, in front of everyone.
His voice was a whisper now, stripped of every sharp edge it had carried an hour ago.
You are young. You'll learn. The board doesn't care who's sitting across from it.
Justin's head dropped. The silence that followed was the sound of a man meeting the edge of himself.
I am done. I am done with all of it. I resign from the club.
He swept his forearm across the board like wiping a table clean, and the scattered pieces clattered into his open duffel bag.
They're all looking at the big man who got humiliated by an old man.
No one moved to stop him. The click of the last bishop hitting the bag echoed off the walls. He zipped the bag shut and stood, his chair scraping back with a sound that felt like an accusation.
Don't look at him. Don't look at any of them.
David took a half step forward, as if to speak, then stopped. The photograph was still in his hand.
You'll find your way back to the board someday, when you are ready.
I'm sorry.
Then the door opened and closed, and the old man who had stalemated Kasparov began to place the fallen pieces back onto their squares, one by one, in the perfect, patient silence. The club exhaled as if a great weight had been lifted. Murmurs started low and then rose, filling the room.
You deserved better than history gave you, Mr. Vance.
History is patient. So am I. Thank you for keeping this photograph.
Their hands met across the table in a grip that spanned 3 decades. Someone lifted Justin's forgotten duffel bag and set it by the door, the clatter of pieces inside echoing like a final move. A young member, eyes wide, asked in a whisper if the old man might ever teach them.
The club needs a new captain first. But yes, I'll come back.
That's a fine idea. I think you'll be good for them.
The room, which had been filled with the weight of history all night, began to stir with something like hope. Outside, under the streetlights, Justin Hayes walked east, his hands empty, his pockets full of a silence he would carry for a long time. Donald rose, buttoning his navy cardigan, and began his slow walk toward the door. A young man, maybe 19, stepped into his path, holding his phone with trembling hands, and asked for a photograph.
Of course. Stand here.
For the first time all night, Donald allowed himself a small, quiet smile. The camera flash lit the dim room, and for a moment, the club was only the old man and the boy. He walked through the door into the Manhattan evening, the yellow light of the street lamps painting the sidewalk. Donald Vance, 78 years old, 30 years of silence behind him, stepped out as if he was walking home from a Tuesday afternoon. The door closed. Inside, the club that had mocked him hours earlier was already talking about when he'd come back. The old man disappeared into the city, night, his navy cardigan swallowed by the dusk. A year later, in a Moscow archive, a sealed file was opened for the first time since 1989. The student lifted a brittle sheet, the ink faded, the edges crumbling. At the top it read, Moscow Simul, 26 boards. Kasparov, G. Vance D. Draw. She photographed it, and within hours, chess historians across continents stared at the image. The evidence was irrefutable. The game had a written record that the Soviets buried. The New York Times called Donald Vance. He answered on the third ring, the next morning's front page. Forgotten 1989. Draw. The man who stalemated Kasparov. The photograph David Volkov had kept was now printed for the world to see. The chess world buzzed. Reddit threads, Grandmaster forums, all lighting up with his name. And in his Harlem apartment, Donald folded the paper, set it by his board, and let the quiet feel different. Donald sat by the window, the newspaper open across his lap, his glasses catching the afternoon light. He read the headline twice, his thumb tracing over his own name like a man touching old Braille. For a long moment he didn't move. The only sound was the page shifting under his breath.
30 years. 30 years, and here it is.
He rose slowly and crossed to the wall where a plain frame held the photocopy of the score sheet David had sent him. His fingertips rested on the glass, just above the word draw. The silence in the apartment wasn't emptiness now. It was peace. The phone had rung all morning. Old colleagues, club members, reporters. He'd answered some. Let the rest ring. He folded the paper again, tucked it under his arm, and walked to the kitchen to make tea, the same way he'd done every afternoon for 30 years. And outside his window, the city moved on, but inside, a long-ago Tuesday in Moscow had finally found its way home. In his spare apartment, Justin Hayes sat on the edge of his bed, scrolling his phone. A news alert stopped his thumb. The New York Times, with a name he hadn't spoken in a year. He read the headline twice, then the opening paragraph, his mouth hanging open.
That night, the 3 games, the silence, and I called him a dinosaur. I offered him a lesson.
He set the phone face down on the nightstand, his hands suddenly unsteady. For a long moment, he stared at the blank wall, his reflection a ghost in the dark screen.
He told me not to let it be the end. I didn't listen.
Across the room, a half-packed box with a chessboard inside caught the afternoon light, untouched for months. He didn't say a word. He just sat there, carrying the weight of a mistake that had nowhere to go anymore. The box went to the closet. The chessboard inside didn't come out again. He found a job downtown. Data entry. No clocks, no crowds, no speeches. Every morning, he walked past the marshal, He never once turned his head. His hands typed invoices now. The Blitz clock was a ghost he'd stopped hearing. The Black King gathered dust. The silence in his apartment turned permanent. He was the captain once. Now, he was just a guy who used to play chess, and nobody knew. At lunch, he'd scroll old tournament photos, then close the tab, stare at nothing. He never played again. Not one game. The resignation had become the rest of his life. On Tuesday nights, when the club was loud with clocks, he sat with a quiet that weighed more than any loss. His championship years lay in an unopened box, and the memory of a Tuesday in Moscow was someone else's story now. At the Marshall, a new frame went up on the back wall, right between Capablanca and Fisher. The photograph was the one from the New York Times, Donald Vance, shaking hands with a young Kasparov. Beneath it, a small brass plate read only, Moscow, 1989, draw. 3 legends on one wall now. 2 of them had never spoken a word in this club. Young players paused beside it. Some took photos. A few just stood and read the plate in silence. One teenager, a black girl with a chess bag over her shoulder, stood there longer than the rest. She didn't take a picture. She just looked, then nodded once and walked to an empty board. The club had a new captain now. The story had found its next pages. On the wall, Donald Vance's calm face watched over the boards. He hadn't needed to speak. The game always spoke for him, and a new generation leaned in, learning the lesson the old captain had missed. The board doesn't ask who you are. It just asks what you can see. Donald Vance still walks into the Marshall on Tuesday afternoons, his navy cardigan buttoned the same way. He finds an empty table, sets up his board, and plays the King's Indian like a man coming home. The young members know him now. They wave. He nods. That's all the conversation they need. In the Chess Museum of America, under glass, the original Moscow score sheet draws a quiet crowd. A small brass plaque reads, 26 boards, 1 draw, erased, then found. David Volkov flew from Russia to see it. He stood before the glass for an hour, then called his old friend. They spoke for 12 minutes. No one knows what was said.
The game was always enough, more than enough.
In his Harlem apartment, Donald sits by the window, a single black king on the board beside him. The best players don't need to speak their moves. The board always does.